Okay, so I was wondering if you can tell me a little bit about the origins of this project. I understand that you kind of brought this.
Yeah, I live in, well, I was living in Vienna, and Nikki Lauder is a friend of my wife's. And I grew up in London. And so the idea of writing a story about the rivalry between an Austrian and an Englishman goes, absolutely to my heart. And I approached Nikki and asked him if, anyone had ever asked him, about doing something about his this extraordinary season in 1976. And I told him that I'd like to do it selfishly as an Englishman with his rivalry with James Hunt. And I told him that for me, the subject of a rivalry between an Englishman and an Austrian it went to the heart of my life. And he loved the idea. And a lot of people had approached Nikki before, but he'd never wanted to do it. But I think he'd seen some of my previous work and trusted me. And so I told him, I said, you're probably not going to like what I do, because people don't. People want a very flattering, photoshopped version of themselves. But of course, an audience would reject that. And so I said, look, I'm going to write you as you are, and you're quite a controversial character. And he trusted me, and he became a very generous collaborator. And so I wrote it entirely on my own, not expecting anything to happen like what's happened. I mean, I never expected it to grow like this. Okay,
and can you talk a little bit about the balancing act of, sort of an action movie on one level, but there's this character, it's very dramatic in one level, and then on top of that, there's a balancing act between, you've got the two leads as well.
Well, I wrote it assuming that I would, if you grow up in America and Los Angeles and you write movies, you probably assume that you can get big budgets. If you grow up in London making movies, you assume you get no money at all. And so I wrote it thinking, this has to work, this has to be interesting and stand alone just as a dramatic piece. And so I did concentrate on the characters and on their story, making the assumption privately that we would never really be able to shoot more than the occasional one car passing or something, or maybe even use archival footage. When Ron felt that with the advances in technology that we might actually be able to shoot some of the racing, I was thrilled, but I never dared hope for footage such as that which they got, because it's the racing scenes in this are so much more exciting and convincing than I ever imagined we'd be able to do. I sort of assumed that when you film tennis with actors playing tennis, it looks dreadful, and when and same with golf, they don't look like the pros. They don't swing like a pro, they don't move like a pro. But we were able to get professional drivers, and that's the difference. So that actually our driving was done at speed.
And maybe if you can speak a bit about the verisimilitude, then, I guess, of the whole, the era that seems to exist in every frame of this.
Well, I mean, in terms of detail and accuracy, I tried to get as much of that as I could in the story, and I had Nikki, I would show him stuff because I don't know my way around, the engine of a car, how mechanics would speak with one another, what it would look like, in those days. And Nikki guided that, but also we had consultants crawling over every aspect of this film to make sure that this looked absolutely right. And there's a lot of footage, of the time which you can look at and make comparisons, so that an art director isn't working totally in isolation.
Okay, excellent. I would love to talk to you more, but I think my time is up, unfortunately.
You're from Universal, don't you?
I am, but I have 4 minutes, I think, so.
Well, even if she's from Universal?
But
4 minutes.
Really? They're the distributors. Okay.
But we're getting...
We're getting announced from the control. You can continue. You can finish.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I'll get in one quick question then, if I can. Just actually about Nikki, because we're doing a bit of focus on that. Because I think he's seen the film since, and have you spoken to him since? He's seen the film, and what his reaction?
I speak to him all the time. I was showing him dailies, to prepare him, because I felt quite protective over him, because on the one hand, I told him he's going to hate it, but on the other hand, I wanted to protect him because he was so generous letting me write about his life and letting me write honestly about his life. So particularly when it came to the accident stuff, I was very nervous, and I started showing him some footage, and he quickly became very emotional. And I think for him to be processing that accident, I think he was so caught up with just the business of survival at the time in 1976. I don't think he ever really stopped to process what had happened. And that has happened entirely. And I know he's seen the finished film, the fully finished film, 3 times. And the last time he saw it, I know he had nightmares, he couldn't sleep, I think it's been very difficult. But I think rewarding. I mean, he's very, very, very happy with the film.
Okay, and now that the movie's being released here at TIFF, kind of the North American premiere, and I've read a lot about the international appeal of the film because F1's much more popular in Europe, per se, than in the United States, and you've got the Brit, the Austrian, and what do you think the strengths, what strengths do you think the movie has that will play to North American audiences?
Well, I do think, you try and do this with every film, but sometimes you just aren't lucky. But I do believe on this occasion we seem to have pulled off a film, but, with good luck, that really surprises people. And I think people go to the cinema wanting to be surprised and to be moved and to be amused and entertained and to feel genuine suspense. And I think that it's a very satisfying emotional experience to watch the movie. I think you come out exhausted in a good way and feeling like feeling like you've had a proper meal. It seems to function way better than I ever hoped it would. So I'm thrilled. I think it makes me look good. To be honest, the film is better than my work.
Great. Thank you very much, Peter.